Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is PTL Perrin.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
Welcome to Books and Brews, episode 51, with our special guest, PTL Perrin. So, Laura, how has your month been?
It's been interesting. I've done a lot of yard work, and I ended up needing emergency surgery because I hurt myself with dead leaves. So that gave me a lot of time to lie around. Other than that, my youngest has graduated from high school, and we got the surprise of our lives when bunnies turned up under the cages. We thought they had all died, and I got the two females back in their cages because you're not supposed to let them get pregnant again immediately. And one of these bunnies just went nuts trying to get out of her cage, and she ended up accomplishing it, and she got her paws and her nose all bloody. And I couldn't understand, like, why would you do this to yourself? You know, it was a nice double wide cage. There was lots of room. And it turned out she was trying to get to her babies. So that was quite something. And we were out in Sedona briefly. Got a call from my son. Here are 4 bunnies, and they were like a month old. They were fluffy and white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, a few things have been going on. Been taking care of the wonderful little bunlets that I've nicknamed the little dudes, who all travel essentially like a little barbershop quartet wherever they go.
They are really
eating
cute.
hay or eating their, dinner or whatever it is. We've also been dealing with our hot tub out on the deck, which has required an inordinate amount of repairs. And so dealing with that has been exciting, but I can report that it is now back in operation, which is a wonderful thing. And other than that, a lot of cleaning cages of both rabbits and chickens, and learning how to make some cocktails, which we're going to see in just a few minutes.
We're going to have fun with the cocktails today, and you managed to get some reading in, too.
Yes, I did. So I read a couple of different things. One was a book called The Crucible by James Rollins. He is a veterinarian turned best-selling author. And so a lot of his books have a lot of medicine and microbiology in them, which I find extremely fascinating. And then I read 2 books by Kurt Schlichter. One called The Split, and the other one called Inferno, which happens to deal with a number of themes in current society and culture, which I find very interesting. And Laura and I share a taste for those books as well. And what have you been reading?
Well, ironically, I have not read that much while I've been lying around recovering from surgery, but I did read this. If I back it up, I think you can see it, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And it's by V.E. Schwab, who I've never heard of. And it's a very fascinating tale of a girl in the 1600s. Well, she's 23. She's an old maid. And she does not want to marry the guy that her parents decide she is finally going to get married and, marry this widower in town. And she sort of accidentally makes a deal with the old spirits. And now she's going to live forever until she agrees to give her soul to Satan. And it's actually a very fascinating look at how she copes with what she believes is a curse and how that works. So that's my book, and I should probably let you ask me.
Who's our guest this month, Laura?
Military brat, voracious reader, and now writing books in her favorite genre, Patty Perrin, who writes as PTL Perrin, grew up in Europe and speaks several languages. A misfit by any account, Patty shares her love for people, native cultures, our amazing world, alien encounters, astounding mysteries, and the creator of it all in her writing. Author of Reflections of a Misfit, an inspirational collection of faith journey snippets, and the 4-book TetraPhere series. I find that hard to say. Patty is working on another young adult sci-fi fantasy series. She enjoys living in Florida and loves her husband and her large and diverse family. So now, welcome, Patty. We are going to start off with the first cocktail. What did you pick?
Well, I have a cocktail called the Mind Eraser, which, based on your reading with Sequoia and the fact that she receives this prophecy, which really starts as an awful noise in her head, a nest of angry hornets, I figured something like a Mind Eraser would be very interesting to her. And also, Sequoia comes across as someone with a very layered character and maybe some earthy notes like coffee. So this cocktail happens to be layered, like Sequoia is, with some Kahlua, with some vodka, and with some club soda. So I can go make that.
Yep, I am going to, and the readers or watchers, I guess, on YouTube will soon discover why we are both sitting in spaceships. You can now see Chris at the bar making the cocktail, and we're going to turn on the cocktail cam too.
This is a layered drink. So we actually pour it in layers, and because of the different specific gravities of the different ingredients, they will remain in layers. And ideally, you would drink it with a straw so that you could taste all the layers as they come together. What we found when we prototyped this drink is you get the same effect of that when you drink it regularly. So it's kind of neat to know that that's the case. The Kahlua goes in first, then the vodka. You may see that this is some rather formidable amounts of alcohol in this drink. With a name like Mind Eraser, you can perhaps understand why. And then, once we have the two layers here, we will top it off with some club soda for a little bit of effervescence and some additional character on the tongue. Inside each glass were just some ice given in a rocks glass. And here we have our Mind Eraser.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So this is it. This is the Mind Eraser, and do a quick run through of what is in this.
We have Kahlua, we have vodka, and we top it off with club soda in a layered drink, which again reminds me of Sequoia and both her earthy notes and her desire to probably not really be so prophetic.
So, Patty, we are ready for the first reading, which you called Warning.
The Warning. And this is the opening chapter in the first book of the TetraPhere series, which is Terra's Call. It sounded at first like a low hum. The tree she sat in shuddered, and she instinctively grabbed the trunk, an unfortunate move. When the sound grew painfully loud, she let go, slammed her hands over her ears, and tumbled off the branch, screaming all the way to the ground, where she landed unhurt on a thick cushion of pine needles. The noise stopped, leaving empty silence. She started to cry, but when she couldn't hear herself, she got up, brushed off, and ran home to her cabin. "Where have you been, Sequoia?" Her grandmother's shout sounded fuzzy. She could tell she was shouting by her bright red face. Before she could answer, Grandmother grabbed her hand and pulled her to the rusty Jeep, where Grandfather gestured for them to hurry. "Are you okay, little one?" he asked, his voice muffled. Her ears felt stuffed with cotton. She nodded. Sequoia knew that something as big as that awful sound meant the entire town would be heading to the stomping grounds. This needed figuring out. Sure enough, people milled all over the grounds, leaving the central square empty. Grandfather made his slow way to the center, next to the fire pit, and raised his arms, filling her heart with pride. The crowd fell silent. "We must seek answers for what happened here today. Nothing happens without a reason. Speak if you know what that noise was." Several piped in at once. "It was a trumpet from heaven," someone said. "I heard a loud engine, like an alien invasion or something," old Buck said. "Ah, come on, old man," a voice called out. "You never got that close to your imaginary aliens." "I said I seen them," he retorted. "I ain't never heard them, but I'm betting they sound like that." Old Buck told everyone who'd listened that he'd seen aliens. Most people laughed at him, but Sequoia believed him. While the grown-ups debated, she ran off to find her friends. That's when a most awful noise started in her head, like a nest of angry hornets. She grabbed her ears and turned back. Her grandmother, noticing she was gone, turned just as she went stiff and grew still, her eyes glazed as if she was in a trance. Sequoia, grandmother called out, ran to her, and yelled for help. 2 men eased her to the ground, where she abruptly sat up and said, "The man wants me to tell you what he's saying." Grandfather made his way to her and bent down, staring straight into her eyes. "It's okay, little one. Tell me what the man is telling you. Don't worry about anyone else." Sequoia took a deep breath and said, "He says, we are watchers. Terra calls out in pain. Her end is near." The grown-ups who heard looked at each other, perplexed. Who is Terra? Sequoia continued, "Prepare for the 4 that your prophecy speaks of. As you have guarded the prophecy, also guard the secret of their existence. The 4 must succeed, or Terra, your earth, will surely die." At that, Sequoia lowered her head and said, "That's all." The old chief straightened up and again raised his hands for silence. "Not all of you have heard the prophecy given to us by the star people many ages ago," he said. "So I will speak it once. It stays among us." The people nodded, remaining silent, intent on hearing every word. "When Mother cries out and death approaches, 4 children of the stars, children with power, will come. Together their power can save her. Apart, they will fail. Beware those who would destroy them." "Grandfather," Sequoia asked when he finished, her voice shaking, "are we going to die?" This time she didn't try to stop the tears. And that's the end of that.
That's a powerful scene, and I think that just sets up the whole series so well. You know from that scene what kind of a story you're going to get. I was curious, where did you get the inspiration for this particular story or these characters?
I enjoy doing research, and I came across a person who is a tetrachromat. That is a person who has 4 types of color cones in their eyes. Most of us have 3. So we see the colors we see. A tetrachromat sees many more, like multiplied, exponentially than we do.
I've heard of that. I don't know if I knew that such people really exist. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah, they do. And there was one of them who is an artist whose name I cannot recall at the moment, which is common for me. But she actually paints in very vibrant colors, and she knows, she has been tested for the number of cones in her eyes, and they know for sure that she is a tetrachromat. So if you look up tetrachromat, her name will pop up. Okay. So I started researching that, and then the idea of having a character who sees millions of colors more than we do fascinated me. And for some reason, I started going down all these rabbit holes in research and wound up with this idea that of this story. It's a story that kind of combines a lot of different things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, you have a lot of interests. What is it about science fiction and fantasy that draws you? Because I think that's the favorite genre you were referring to in your bio.
Yeah, it's just something I've always loved. When I was a teenager, that's when Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods came out. And I read that book, and it just made total sense to me. Of course, aliens have been visiting our planet, and this is how the pyramids were built, and so on and so forth. It made sense to me, where regular, normal explanations for these things did not at all.
I really got into that maybe about a month ago because I was this close to believing we had a Sasquatch who stole our Christmas tree. So as you know, we had a very long winter, and the snow was incredibly deep. So after Christmas, we just tossed the tree off the edge of the deck, and the deck's only like, 10 inches high or something. It's very close to the ground. And so when the snow finally melted, which was like late April, Chris hauled the tree over to the pond. And the next day, an entire Christmas tree was missing. And so long story short, I got very sucked into, we were out in the woods hunting for it. We were searching high and low, just because at that point, like, we don't care. We don't want a dead Christmas tree, but we need to know what happened. And I did start listening to a lot of videos about Bigfoot, and it was quite fascinating.
Mhm.
And, I think there are a lot of things in this world we don't know.
Exactly.
So I think I got this off your website because I don't know where else these questions came from. But on your website, do you talk about dragons in Atlantis?
A little bit, yes, I do. I question the existence of them.
Mhm.
In essence, I really don't question the existence of them at all. I fully believe that they existed.
Mhm.
And Atlantis is a city that's missing somewhere in the ocean. Where it is, nobody knows, but they have speculated that it may be off the coast of, in the Bahamas. It may be in the Bahamas. And there's the tongue of the ocean, which is a very deep trench there. And it's probably in that trench. And so the Atlantis in my story, that's where it is.
Okay. That's another thing that, how we end up going down these rabbit holes. And I did end up reading things about Atlantis. And what really fascinated me, because I've never been a believer in Atlantis, it's a great story, that's it. But one of these videos I was listening to said this dates all the way back to, I believe it was Plato.
Yes.
And it's a story that Plato heard from I think it had come down through his family for 400 years, but they know exactly who told him this story. They knew exactly which ancestor and where the ancestor got the story from. And when they did the math, that this ancestor was told, I think by someone in Egypt, maybe, he asked, well, when did this, island suddenly disappear? And they gave him an exact number, 9,200 years ago or whatever it was. And when they compared that number with other dates and years, it all matched up.
Sure.
And I was amazed. I've never heard that.
Oh, there is a history long before the history that we know, of this planet. And they're discovering they're digging up so many ancient cities and ancient relics that they have really no explanation for. A lot of biblical, a lot of things that are mentioned in the Bible, a lot of cities and things that are mentioned in the Bible, they completely dismissed and said, we've never seen any evidence of it. They're finding the evidence now.
Aren't they finding, unearthing a city near the Euphrates?
Oh,
yeah, it's
so
amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
we have a lot of really fascinating places on this earth, and I included a lot of them in the books. Not all in one book, but in the books throughout the story, because they are real places and they are unexplained places, and they all have very fascinating theories or histories. So I figured that I could give people a little bit of an education while they're reading the story, and they won't even know it. It's just the fun.
Well, and to me, that's kind of the sad thing, is that they will believe you're just using old myths and things. And not to tell you what to do, but I think you should write a book that gives your research and says, some things might be realer than we've been told.
Well, all they have to do is look at ancient aliens to see pretty much everything. Because as I found out after I did some research and after I wrote a lot of these scenes, I heard about them on Ancient Aliens later. Okay. So it was almost like it was a confirmation, stuff that I had made up in my stories.
Is Ancient Aliens like a radio program?
No, it's a television program. And it's on the History Channel.
Okay.
And most of it is reruns now because they've been doing this for quite a long time. But Eric von Daniken, the author of that book, is one of the people that they feature on there, and he's still alive and he's still doing that kind of research.
That's amazing. I think we are ready for cocktail number 2. I'm so used to saying beer number 2. So, Chris.
So our next cocktail is based upon this character in your second reading called Vega, who I found a very, very interesting character, with being electric blue in the shadows, with a deep voice like chocolate silk, and all of these things. It just made me think of a drink that could capture all these types of aspects. And so what we have here is an electric blue raspberry chocolate martini, which I'm going to be making. And it is a wonderful drink. So I'm going to look forward to making that here for you right now.
This is a messy one.
What we first do is put some ice into a shaker. We start off with a jiggerful of this wonderful UV blue raspberry vodka. Then we move to just half an ounce of some white creme de cocoa. Creme de cocoa normally is the color of chocolate, and a white creme de cocoa allows you to use the taste of creme de cocoa without affecting the color of your drink, which, given this electric blue, color, is very important. We then use a bit of triple sec. This is a bit of a liqueur with kind of an orange or mandarin flavor to it. So this is going to help accentuate the fruit aspects of the drink, in addition to the chocolate. And then we end with just a bit of lime juice. And since I'm making 2 of them, I will then duplicate all the ingredients, which I can do in this shaker very easily. I think if you're going to have a cocktail about space travel, it has to be electric blue, no matter how you slice it. So this is an awesome drink to have here. A little bit more ice in. Grab my shaker, take it with the ice in, and then I have some wonderful martini glasses, of course. We strain the ice out for the cocktail, and there we have it.
That's beautiful.
Isn't that the neatest thing?
So beautiful. Now I'm thirsty. I want one.
Well, you
Give me
have
one.
recipe, so cheers.
Cheers.
This is really nice. I strongly advise everybody to try this at home. Kids, try this at home if you're over 21. So, just in case any of our 7.1 million listeners are wondering where Michael is, he is on a brief sabbatical still. Life has gotten very busy. But we have our new Books and Brews mug that you can order from Zazzle. I think we have some posters there too. And Patty, we are ready for reading number 2.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask you quick, before you start, Jewel and Sky are girls, Storm and Pax are boys, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Go
Okay.
ahead.
And the book is written from 4 different points of view. So each one will have their chapters, and it will say at the top of the chapter who it is who is speaking, in case you get confused, because they do tend to sound a lot like each other because they're all educated. This is reading from Terra's call, from Jewel's point of view. I crouch behind Storm as he approaches the cave entrance. Rocks lift into the air on both sides of us. Pax sniffs, grabs Storm's shirt, and pulls him back. It's not them, he whispers. Someone is out there waiting, but it isn't a Draken. All I saw the last time was the ship, Storm retorts. Can you smell the difference between a Draken and an Alaran ship? There might not be a ship out there, Pax replies. I smell something alive I don't recognize, but it's much more bearable than Draken stink. Okay, I won't throw anything until I get a visual. Fair enough? Pax nods and follows Storm to the opening with Sky and me trailing close behind. It's a sentinel, I call out as soon as I spot the craft floating just above the treetops. Storm and Pax glance up and then at each other and shake their heads. Sky takes a longer look and says, Sorry, Jewel, can't see it. Are you sure you're not imagining things? She's teasing, of course. I know she believes me. It's there, but more importantly, so is he. I nod toward the tall person standing by the trees at the edge of the clearing. He's dressed in shiny metallic coveralls like the clothing the Watchers wear, but this is no little bald guy. He towers over the boys. His skin throws off prisms where sunlight hits it and blends in various shades of electric blue in shadow. Long, loose hair so white it reflects the colors of the woods, blows in the wind. His eyes, the same shape as ours, glow in swirls of colors I cannot name. He has no aura, but his entire form is encased in a soft light. His beauty stuns me. The creature smiles and reveals perfect pearlescent teeth. Joy rises in me and Sky projects her exultation. I steal a glance at the boys. Pax is frowning so deeply his eyebrows meet over his wrinkled nose. Storm scowls and a low growl comes from his throat. Who are you? Storm asked. Do you know what happened to Sequoia and Wolf? I am Vega. It is good to meet you, Storm. His deep voice is like silk running over my skin. Storm winces. Does he hear it differently? Pax hasn't lost his frown, only now he's frowning at me. Storm answers with a question. How do you know my name? He closes his hands into fists and relaxes his elbows. I can tell he's ready to fight by his stance, legs apart and knees slightly bent. Pax stands at the ready as well. What's up with these guys? Can't they tell Vega is our friend? I have no wish to fight you, Storm. Vega's voice soothes like chocolate, and I'm a marshmallow melting between two graham crackers. What is wrong with me? Maybe the boys are right to be cautious. By her drooling smile and her vague expression, I guess the sky is as mesmerized as I am. I forget that you would not know who I am. Please forgive me and allow me to introduce myself properly. I am Vega, the scientist whose DNA you share, Storm.
It's a great hook. It really left me wondering, who is Vega? Now, some of the authors we interview, I've never met before, apart from the interview. For our 7.15 million listeners, it just went up. This is amazing. You're good. I actually do know Patty. You run the Books by Brat's Facebook group, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have interviewed a number of military brat authors. Before I get into that, though, can you give just a quick rundown of Jewel, Sky, Storm, and Pax and what their abilities are?
Sure. Jewel is, she is a pentachromat as opposed to a tetrachromat. So she sees millions more colors than even a tetrachromat does. Plus, she sees through disguises. And the Alorans are a race of aliens who've lived on this planet for thousands of years. And their ships have the ability to cloak, so nobody can see them. But she sees through the cloaking and she sees the ships, which is how she spotted that one. She also sees auras and life forces. Sky is an empath, and she not only feels the emotions of people around her, but she can project her emotions. And as the books progress, she learns to weaponize that. So it becomes very interesting. Sky is an interesting character. Then there is Pax, is her twin brother, Sky's twin brother. And he has the ability to smell the way a hound dog smells, only many times more. So Jewel, when she first hears of that, she feels very sorry for him because, who wants to be in a boys' locker room and have to smell all that millions of times over? But he also has the ability to shut it off. But it comes in very handy, when it comes to searching out people or identifying things. And then Storm he has the ability to move things around with his mind. He can pick up large boulders and toss them, as far as he wants to. He has a very powerful mind. He's also has very deep anger issues. And so his ability can be very dangerous, not only to others with whom he's upset or angry or scared of, but also himself and people around him.
Right.
So
right.
Throughout the books, he has to learn to control that anger issue, and eventually gets to he gets some answers in his life. But there's a lot that goes on there.
For some reason, I'm kind of jumping all over the place here. I didn't actually finish my thought. Patty and I met, what year was it? January 2019?
Something like that. I can't remember years.
I can't remember if it was, I think it was 2019, but we actually shared a room at the Amelia Island Book Festival that happens, I believe, every January. And so I roped my 17-year-old son into making the drive from Minnesota to Florida with me and made him help. And he didn't really appreciate that at first, but I think he ended up having fun. And, as a reward, I bought him some books that he wanted, and he was interested in Patty's books. And so he really enjoyed them. And I don't think he's necessarily a huge reader, but I think he might have read the entire series as we drove home. And he really enjoyed them a lot. So I can personally, vouch for Patty's books and highly recommend them. And I'm enjoying hearing the voices that you use as you read too. Now, you grew up in the military, obviously, because you're running the Books by Brats. And it's amazing how many authors we know who grew up in the military. I think that maybe it's pretty common for military brats to do a lot of reading. Was that true for you too?
Oh, yes. What we lived in Germany for the most part. No, Germany for a year and then Italy for the most part, about 8 years. And the only television you have access to is in the language of that country. And it was only like 12 hours a day. And so we didn't even bother getting televisions. My parents didn't get them. And reading was what we did in our spare time for fun, you know. Besides other things, we did a lot of things for fun, but reading was what I did most of when I was at home, because then get my homework done very quickly and then dive into books. And I loved, this is a genre that I really enjoyed, you know, science fiction and fantasy. There are a lot of science fiction fantasy books that I can remember and played a big part in what I write.
What were some of the favorites?
Oh, the Dragon Rider series by Anne McCaffrey.
Dragon Riders of Perrin.
Yes.
I love those books. Yeah.
And I liked Robert Heinlein, you know, his books. And
that's one of his favorites.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And if you can name some, I'm sure I've probably read them, you know, just whatever was
Stranger in a Strange Land was probably my very favorite of his, and especially the unabridged version of it.
Yes.
Because at the time he wrote that, that was it was a very difficult type of novel to bring out in the 1930s. And his wife subsequently published the unabridged version later, and I found that story to be much richer.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
So tell me about some of your favorite experiences growing up in Germany and Italy. Like for me, I'd say, you know, castles, going to the Alps, you know, those were some things I really loved. What were some of yours?
I did a lot of hitchhiking.
Really?
My parents were not on board with that, but I was very kind of rebellious. And so I went and did my own thing. And I did a lot of traveling by thumb and saw a lot of different places. There was one of my favorite experiences that I like to talk about a lot was when I spent the night at Frankenstein's castle in Frankenstein, Germany, in the ruins by myself in a pup tent on a full moon night. And
that's, you know, and that reminds me, when we lived in Germany, and it sounds like you were quite a bit older. I was only, you know, not quite 6 when we left, but we did spend a month camping around England, and we camped outside a cemetery once, and that actually kind of freaked out my dad, which I would not have expected, but there was this cracked tombstone. And so to sleep outside Frankenstein's castle by yourself, it's incredible.
Now,
if there's a more auspicious beginning to an author's career, it's staying outside Frankenstein's castle in a pup tent on a full moon night.
That's right. And even though Frankenstein himself was fiction, the castle is real. And it's ruins right now. And it's very haunted, according to somebody else whose book I read about it. But I didn't get haunted.
Did you go inside?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's all open. It's all open. There were stairs that went up to the ramparts, and I went up there. You know, I explored the whole thing. But I did this myself because I wanted to be able to talk about it later. It's just kind of weird that I would even think that at that age.
Right. You know? But I think that's where, you know, a writer's imagination starts. I can remember reading a writer talking about how they were too invested in capturing the moment, thinking, I need to remember how this feels because I need to be able to write about it. And I'm not even going to repeat, he saw a very gruesome car accident.
Oh.
And he was talking about, I'm not going to describe it because it's really too awful, but he talked about how he found himself running towards this woman to try and help her and thinking, this is terrible. I'm thinking about how to describe this as a writer when I shouldn't even be thinking like that. But I think a lot of writers do. We're like, what does it feel like?
Yeah.
What is this experience? You know, I need to be able to describe it. So I am curious before we move on to book 3, other writers always want to know, what kind of marketing do you do for your books, and what have you found that works?
I found the thing that works best for me is just being there in person and talking to people. You know, and that maybe it's my enthusiasm, whatever, but I tend to sell more books that way than I do online. like most writers, I am not a marketer and just never really got interested in the whole marketing world. And I know that many people are fascinated with that. And when I can afford it, I'll probably hire somebody to do that. But at the moment, that isn't going to happen. So I put my books out there. I have websites. I have 2 websites that where my books are, and I lead people to them all the time. You know, I post things on Facebook. But what I'd like to do even more than posting about my books, I like to support other writers and post about their books and send that out into the universe and, you know, to people, because I feel like that's probably a better return emotionally than even selling 1 million books. You know,
well, and I think that kind of fits your world philosophy, is that we're not really here for ourselves. We're here, you know, for a bigger purpose.
Sure.
And we might get into that in the next segment. I think we are ready for cocktail number 3.
This is probably one of my favorites. This was a very neat drink when you wrote about this island of Corfu you know, off of Greece. And I was inspired to think of a drink which happens to be called Summer on Corfu, which is a very Greek cocktail. So you can imagine sitting in a cafe drinking all of the flavors you're about to hear go into this drink, where all of them blend together in exactly some of the characteristics that you describe, an extravagant expression of unmerited love and generosity, a trip that's magical. And I think when we drink this drink, you're not going to taste the rum, you're not going to taste each of the fruit juices that's in it, or even the bitters, but all of them together make what I would consider a very ancient and very pleasing taste. So I'll before you know.
You know, I'm going to need all these recipes.
We will send them, and we'll probably post them on the video too.
Good.
He's grabbing something from the fridge. Ooh, the mystery ingredient. This is like I'm in the chef. It doesn't look very interesting. What is this we have here?
What we have here is egg white, which with a dry shake in the drink, which means that you shake the ingredients either with or without the egg white. In this case, it's with. You shake it on ice for 30 seconds, and it produces a wonderful foam, which is a very nice, smooth, sweet addition to the drink. So this has a fair number of ingredients, which we will have some fun with. We're going to start with 2 different kinds of rum, a light or white rum, and then a gold rum. These rum is, of course, derived from sugar cane, and the characteristics of it, you know, you essentially have more or less of part of the deep sugar taste in it. And so you've also perhaps heard of dark rums or spiced rums, and they'll have even more depth and characteristics to them. Then we do a kumquat liqueur. Kumquat is a flavor that is a bit like a cross between orange and some other flavors. But this is incredibly difficult to get. So I'm going to use triple sec as a substitute because of its kind of orangey background. Then we use some grapefruit juice.
And I will tell you, when I heard the recipe from this, it did not sound appealing because I do not like grapefruit juice.
And then pineapple juice as well. Then we put in a few dashes of Angostura bitters, and then we put in our egg white. And the first thing we do is to shake it without the ice in order to emulsify the egg.
30 seconds.
This part actually doesn't need to be 30 seconds, but the next part will. Then we put the ice in, and this is what's the dry shake. And when you shake an egg white with ice, it can get kind of powerful. So you really want to keep a close hold on it, or you will have egg white everywhere. And what you will see here is a very blended drink where the egg white foam rises to the top, producing that wonderful kind of smooth, creamy texture to the drink. I give you Summer in Corfu. Cheers.
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 Like I said, I do not like grape juice, but this is a good drink.
Yeah.
It is summery. It's kind of fruity. It's very nice. And we're ready for your reading. And the reader will see, or the listener will hear, why we've changed backgrounds.
Okay.
And why we're drinking a summery drink.
This is from my book, Reflections of a Misfit, which is not fiction. Barrier or bridge. When I was 19, a friend and I traveled from Vicenza in northern Italy to Bari at the heel of the boot, where we bought cheap deck passage on a ship to Greece. As our ship approached a solid cliff, I stood at the bow and watched a dolphin pod leap and race toward shore. A crack in the wall widened, and we headed into a crevasse. The ship slid through the Corinth Canal so close to the cliffs on each side, I felt as if I could brush the stones with my hand. At the end, the sea once again opened to a clear passage to the islands beyond. We stayed on the island of Corfu, or Kerkira, as it's said as they say it in Greece, for a week, and then we traveled to the mainland. We carried a small tent in one of the backpacks and slept wherever we could find level ground when it got dark. One evening, we pitched the tent in a field and woke up to a shouting farmer. The Greek people, like Italians, use their hands as much as their mouths to speak. We understood by his gestures that we were to follow him. We were pretty sure we were in trouble for trespassing on his property. He led us to a covered patio at his home, where his smiling wife served us breakfast along with his family. We had misinterpreted his intent. He meant to bless us and not to do us harm. In Paul's first letter to the Corinthians on chapter 13, he said, "If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal." Language is both a barrier and a bridge. We didn't understand what our Greek friends said, but the love they showed helped us understand what they meant. What we thought was a clanging cymbal or a warning siren turned out to be an extravagant expression of unmerited love and generosity. When we pray in tongues, the intent of the heart is much more important than the words we use. God has no trouble figuring out what we mean because he knows what we're thinking and feeling. He knows when we're grateful and full of praise, and he knows when we're sorry, have deep needs, or are full of pain. The language that flows makes perfect sense to the one who gave it to us. The people we encountered made the trip magical. We learned a few words of Greek and taught some of them a few words of English. The most important lesson we all learned, though, is that love is a universal language.
That was a really beautiful description of sailing between that crevice. And of course, it also kind of makes me the people who owned the house before us filled the woods with all these, and a lot of times almost life-size statues of animals, like there are monkeys swinging from the trees and turtles on rocks. And one of them is a puma. And so he's always making that joke about pumas in the crevasse.
From the Smothers Brothers.
So I can no longer hear the word crevice without wanting to laugh. Oh, or was it the crevasse?
Pumas in the crevasse.
Right. So, I was really curious. This is two very strikingly different styles of writing. Going from sci-fi to memoir, what differences did you experience in trying to write two very different forms of literature?
They flow differently. You're just in a different place, a different flow. With the science fiction, I can really get into descriptions of things. I'm building a world. In that my other book, the world is already built, and I'm just praising the one who built it. So it's a very different feeling and a different flow. Each one was very natural in its own way. So when I'm writing in fiction, when I'm in that zone, it's very natural for me to write the way I do for that purpose. And when I'm writing my devotions, or what this book turned out to be, I'm in that zone, totally different zone. So it's just different facets of personality. It's different purposes. It just seems to come naturally, whichever way I go. It's like speaking another language. When you speak 2 or 3 different languages, when you move from one to the other, you are not translating. You're simply.
Interestingly, I just had this experience when I was in the hospital. The woman next to me was this is a wild story, and I ended up actually writing a book about it over the last couple of days. It was a very fascinating story, but to keep it short, she was moving back and forth between possibly 3 languages. We think at least 3. And so, you know, she was speaking English with the doctor. She was speaking Spanish with her husband and maybe her sons. And then she is also, I believe, Ojibwa. And so we're guessing that might have been the 3rd language, but she was on the other side of the curtain. You know, there were 2 beds in the room. And she would just switch literally mid-sentence. I'd be like, wait, I feel like I just, like a car flew around a curve and I got flung off, like you're in a different language now, literally mid-sentence. And I did want to ask you, what languages do you speak?
Spanish, German, Italian, English, and glossolalian.
Glossolalian, which is?
Which is speaking in tongues.
Really? I never heard that word for it.
Well, when I mentioned that to one person, he says, he thought for a minute and he says, oh yeah, I think I've been to that island.
Glossolalia.
I can see where someone would say that. Now, I do try to read most or all of an author's book, at least one of them, before I have an interview. So I was reading the sample on Amazon, and your brother talked about, how did I word this? You know, about the feeling of never really fitting in when you grow up in the military. Do you think that that is like common or 100%?
Oh no, I think that's pretty common, especially when because you're constantly switching schools and you're always the new kid on the block. And when you go from military school to military school, they tend to make it easier for you because this is the common experience of everybody there. But when you go from a military school to, let's say you come back to the States and you go to a regular public school, then people do not know at all. They don't understand.
Did you end up going to mostly in-town schools or more to the military schools?
Well, I went to a German school and then an Italian school and then the military schools. So
no wonder you're so fluent.
Well, yeah, it was sink or swim. You know, they threw us in. Nobody spoke our language to us. They only spoke theirs. And so we either had to learn the language or we just died on the vine because you had no choice. And so as kids, we learned the languages.
Yeah, I went to the military school in Germany. And like I said, I left there when I was quite young. So the kindergarten was actually in a room in the basement of our apartment building. So to go to kindergarten, I walked out my door, down 2 flights of stairs and down a basement hall. And that was my kindergarten classroom. So they spoke English, which was nice. But on the flip side, I didn't learn the language. Like I'm semi-fluent in it, but not good. Now, I wanted to know, you know, what advice would you give to military kids today who feel like misfits?
Well, I would probably say to them what I say to some of my other friends who are also misfits, because that we are all misfits. We are all misfits. And when the Bible talks about misfits, in David's companions, they called them David's misfits. They were misfits because they were not the ones following the established pattern. Jesus calls his followers misfits as well in one place in one of the translations that I'm constantly reading. And so we are all misfits. And this is what I tell them, you know, you are you, just be you in whatever situation you're in. And the people who are meant to be drawn to you and meant to be your friends will be, and those who are not meant to be. You know, enjoy the ones that you have. And if you don't have friends, just be yourself. And at some point, somebody is going to rise up as your best friend, because everybody is looking for someone to connect with.
I think there's so much truth to that, you know, and I like your answer. For me, on a very practical level, you know, I found that music was where I fit. Although interestingly, I have always felt with musicians, even though that's my passion, I never really felt like I fit either. It's when I started my authors group. That's when I just felt like, you know, I
Yeah.
fit. This is where I belong.
Yeah.
But
As trombonists, we will always be Misfits.
have I ever told you my crayons stuck in the mouthpiece story?
I'll bet it's a doozy.
It's a doozy, and we do not have time to get into it. But let me just say, a Crayola crayon is the absolute perfect size to fit in the shank of a trombone mouthpiece. And had I known that would have come up, I'd have a visual of my trombone mouthpiece. And once it breaks off, it does not come out easily. And I can tell you from the experience of the trombonist next to me that not only does it not come out easily because it's jammed in, you know, all the way, but when you try to play the trombone as your big brass entrance comes, it's not going to work. And the whole band, the whole orchestra is going to burst out laughing instead of playing. And you have never lived until you've heard an entire brass section try to play and instead snort and laugh into their instruments. So, Steve Wilson, if you're listening, here's to you. You are not forgotten. That stands as possibly one of the funniest things that has ever happened in my life. So, what is next for you? You're working on another series.
I am. I took one of the characters. She is a brand new character in the very last book, and I'm following her life now. And she is kidnapped into a different dimension where time moves differently, and she bonds with a dragon, and it's a really, really fun story to write. So I'm excited about it.
Is it a little more lighthearted than The World's Gonna End?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are parts that are not, and there are parts that are.
I've kind of found it fun to go from, you know, my Bluebells of Scotland series. It's funny. There's a lot of humor in it because Sean is a really funny guy, in my humble opinion. But it's also very serious. You know, there's death and war, and there's this whole introspection and looking at yourself and humility and vowing to change. So it's also very serious. But one of the books that we're kind of working on is the Ivy League Mystery Series. And that's
good.
Well, and in fact, Ivy League was born on the way home from Amelia Island. I don't think I've told you about her, have I?
No, but I'm going to read the book, so hurry up and get them published.
It's about I have to write it first. It's about a 24-hour drive from Amelia Island back home. We lived in the Twin Cities, and so I was with Connor. He was 16 or 17. He couldn't drive yet, so it was all on me. And it was still winter in Minnesota, and I was starting to get sick, and I desperately needed chicken noodle soup so I could keep driving because I didn't feel like we had the money for a hotel. And we got to this IHOP. Connor will never let me forget every time we pass an IHOP. Hey, do you want to go eat at IHOP? And I'm like, no, because Connor ordered steak. It's like 10 o'clock at night. I had a long night of driving ahead of me. I ordered a bowl of chicken noodle soup. They brought his steak. The minutes are ticking by. And like 25 minutes later, they come out, oh, by the way, we're out of chicken noodle soup. I'm like, it took you 25 minutes to tell me that? Why could you? And I'm normally a very polite person, and I think I was still polite, but I was just fuming like, I'm sick. I need this chicken noodle soup. Could you not have at least told me? But my mind started turning, you know, like writers' minds do, thinking, why would it take 25 minutes? What in the world was going on in that kitchen? So,
could it be murder?
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, and there's a whole lot more to the Ivy League story, but I'll leave it at that. Patty, where can readers find you?
On Amazon, and I am under, my name is P.T.L. Perrin. PTL is in Praise the Lord, or my initials. So that's what I write under. Or they could go to my website, which is ptlperrin.org, and you can find all the books there. And actually, the links will take you to Amazon from there.
All right. Do you have like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything like that?
On Facebook, I am author Patty Perrin. Perrin is how you spell my last name. And it's with P like in peanut butter and not T like in terrapin.
I have that problem with my email address, which includes the composer Pachelbel with the P. And a lot of people think my email is Taco Bell. No.
It's an easy thing to mishear.
It is.
Yes,
it
is.
And Laura, where can people find you and Michael on Books and Brews?
Michael, our regular co-host, is at perfectpint.net. And I think it's the same. I don't remember how many social media he has under that. He doesn't use them anyway, kind of like I don't use a lot of mine. But he's at perfectpint.net. Michael and I are at Brews at Instagram. That's book singular, the letter N, brews plural. That's because that's what was available, not because we want to be difficult. Our website is booksandbrews.net, and you can find us at Facebook at Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew.
What are some of the upcoming events you have?
So, well, you didn't let me tell you where I can find myself, where my 7.15 million listeners can find me.
I think it just went to 1.4.
It did. Oh, shoot. I screwed it up. I'm at lauravosica.com, and I think that perhaps bluebellschronicles.com might take you to the same site. I'm at laura.vosica.author on Facebook, and I'm at really nothing else.
So, Laura, what are some of the upcoming events?
Well, this isn't really my upcoming event, but we had a former guest, Michael and I did name Jeff LaFerny, who wrote mostly young adult, kind of similar to yours, actually, Patty, that there's a little bit of kind of sci-fi elements to these characters having some special abilities. But he's also written a couple mysteries, and he is about to release his 8th book called The Lake House. And it's a mystery set around a lake in Tennessee. But if you loved our former guest, Jeff LaFerny, please look him up and look up his new book, The Lake House, that the ebook should be out by early next week. So very, very soon. And Patty, do you have any upcoming events?
Not really. My books are not ready for publication yet, but they're getting there.
And Laura, can you tell us what you have coming up next month on Books and Brews?
I say this every month, but I mean it every month. I really do. Next month's guest. Karen Essex is actually, when I started putting my books out in 2009, she is one of the very first authors that I connected with on social media. I don't know if she remembers that. I don't know how long her books had been out before that, but I think that she and I started publishing at the same time. So in fact, I'm feeling like kind of a loser reading bio and all her accomplishments in that time, but I'm very excited that I knew her back when, and she really was one of my first author connections. So Karen Essex is an award-winning best-selling author of 6 books, including Leonardo's Swans and Stealing Athena. She has recently co-written a pilot based on her 2-volume novel, Cleopatra, for Netflix, which Lauren Hisrich, hopefully I said that right, creator of the Witcher franchise, will executive produce. Karen has adapted Anne Rice's The Mummy for James Cameron and Fox Studios and collaborated on adapting her novel Dracula in Love as a series for A&E Studios and Lifetime. She just completed a historical novel about the fabulous Gabor sisters, which I'm interested in hearing about. They were the first global fashion and glamour influencers, and she is determined to enjoy her summer. That's funny. I should read these bios beforehand because my first thought is, do you live in Duluth?
Well, darling, I'm really looking forward to next month's
Summer
guest.
is only going to be 2 days long. Because that's kind of how I feel after this past winter. I'm determined to enjoy my 2 days of summer. And I think we might have a day of spring before that.
Wishful thinking.
Okay, well, anyway, our hot tub is done. So
Cheers.
cheers. Thank you for being our guest, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now we can cough.
Okay.
I can scratch my nose.
But yeah, exactly. You know,
Stop recording. This recording. Whew, thank goodness. I had